Hey folks, it is April the 14th, and today we're going to continue on with a small part of our lecture over Unit 1's Introduction to World Geography. My goal is either by the end of the week or early next week, I want to have we're going to have a class project. And I want to have the instructions for you, the online students, on how you're going to do that, and for the in-class students. This is going to count as a test grade because I'm hoping that we don't take too many more tests. We might take one more test in this class, but we might not. I want to see how well the project does, and maybe we'll do a second one with a little twist. So make sure, if you have not, bless you, go in and do the online quiz. And after that, I have posted another Study Island assignment. The last one was due on the 12th, so it's late. Make sure you do it. Some folks here and not here have not done it yet. So make sure you do it today. Progress reports are out Friday, so what's not in there shall be counted as a 0 and will reflect poorly on you. Otherwise, it should be cool. So last time we were talking about lines of latitude going all the way up to 90 degrees north and south, the equator in the middle, and of course divided between the Arctic circles, the Tropic of Cancer in the north, and the Tropic of Capricorn in the south. Moving on from there, we see highland climate. Now, mountain ranges do a lot to shape the climate within certain continents. For example, North America, our mountain ranges have a lot to do with why we have such a large desert basin region within the central western part of North America. A lot of this has to do with mountain ranges that prevent precipitation from crossing over into them. So, as elevation increases, the temperature decreases. And that's very true. It's very true. It drops about 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet of elevation. Areas at these elevations have cooler climates. But at the same time, sometimes if you've ever spent time in the mountains, you'll notice that it'll go through cycles within just minutes of deep cold and then heat. And it can come with just cloud cover. So especially when you get to where it just feels like the ozone's a little thinner, you notice when the sun comes out, get very hot, and the clouds come in, and all of a sudden it's really cold. The orographic effect. Prevailing winds blow over water and are forced up a mountain, or 8 mountains. The higher elevations cool the air, causing condensation and precipitation. The air is then dry when it reaches the other side and causes a rain shadow desert. So that's what I was talking about in a lot of the central West America. So this is also how helps form a lot of our rivers. And so you'll notice that it's usually around the mountains where certain streams will start, and the water runoff will eventually collect, and it'll be the birth of or the starting points for rivers as they then run down to the ocean. Most rivers in the world run from north to south, except for a few examples, such as the Nile, which goes from south to north, starting at Lake Victoria. So keep in mind that mountains can help influence climate. Wind and ocean currents. So we have monsoons. These are seasonal shifts in the winds from South and Southeast Asia. They're fairly predictable. They bring in a lot of rain that's needed for a lot of areas, such as in India for agriculture. But at the same time, they can be really, really heavy and cause a lot of devastation and loss of life. Effect on climate. These seasonal winds bring rain in the summer and dry weather in the winter. And so going back to India, they can go through some pretty severe droughts as well whenever they're not in the monsoon season. And so that, once again, can cause hardship if it's significantly lengthened. But on normal times is predictable. So these people know from thousands of years living there when to store up their food and when to plant and get ready, when to reap, and all these other things. But when it's a little out of whack, it can be really bad for them. So, on the other hand, we don't only have wind patterns, we also have ocean currents. And so, the Gulf Stream is a warm ocean current flowing from the Caribbean Sea up to Western Europe. And it's the Gulf Stream is why, even though England is rather far up north, the Gulf Stream brings in a lot of warm air and water that helps keep England much warmer than it would have been if it was in Canada, say, at that same elevation. And so this can change climate patterns as well. Proximity to water. Because Western Europe is close to the water and this warm current, its climate is warmer than it would have been based on latitude alone. So like I said, if it was like further west towards North America, it would have been very cold. And here you see on the bottom right-hand corner, you see a thermal map, and it's showing that Gulf Stream bringing that warm water, and which is also warming the air around it up. I'm not sure if the slide has it, but there are also smaller streams as well that are known as gyres that essentially they're like circular patterns in the ocean of movement. And so you can see examples of this as far as moving silt, but also even moving like trash in the ocean to help collect it up. Essentially, in some places, like in the Pacific, you'll have these floating trash islands of like plastic and junk. So like I know you've learned this in middle school science, and maybe even before that, where we'd have different kinds of climates, right? And you've known from your days back then that these different climates have different kinds of vegetation, and they have different kinds of animals and precipitation and temperatures and things like that. So this is just a review. So first we have rainforest, a belt of lush vegetation found near the equator, often referred to as jungle. Two largest rainforests are in the Amazon in South America and the Congo in Central Africa. Now there are smaller rainforests scattered along this region, but you will find that, yes, they're generally around the equator, which means that their temperature and their rains are very consistent. It takes a lot of rain and a lot of heat for this ecosystem. Savanna, tropic and subtropic grasslands in mid-latitudes, usually found on the edges of rainforest. And of course, there are shorter rain seasons within these places, but very long periods of drought as well. And so because of that, a lot of the animals there have to migrate quite regularly, and it's built into their life patterns. But like we see with people, whenever there's like a kink in it, if like the dry season is too long, you can start having a die-off of certain species, especially the ones that have a hard time moving, like hippos, for example. They might live well within a lake, but if there's an unseasonal drought that's longer than normal and they go without water too long, the hippos will die. However, other animals such as migratory birds and of course, like zebras and things like that, they can move along much easier. All right, desert, a region that receives less than 10 inches of precipitation per year. They can be caused by climates or rain shadow because of the mountains. And of course, a desert doesn't necessarily mean simply just like sand dunes as you see in the picture. You can also have salt flats. You can have Antarctica. Antarctica is technically a desert, even though it's covered in ice water, because it receives such little amount of precipitation, even snow. What you see there has been built up from thousands and thousands of years. I believe the driest desert's in South America. I think it's the Atacama Desert. But you'll find pockets of deserts just about anywhere throughout the world. Steppe, a flat plain with no trees. Short grasses are said to be the norm in the steppe. It may be semi-desert or covered with grass or shrubs or both. Regions to dry support a forest, but not dry enough to be a desert. So here often you can think of plains animals. Um, so like I think of the Great Plains in America where we have bison and buffalo that, for thousands of years migrated across America, moving east and west, and then west and east, eating grass, fertilizing it, and moving on.
Hold on.
I'm holding on. Usually, people who live within these regions rely, of course, on cattle, sheep, and horse. Usually migratory.
And I
You
can
think
do
of
it.
Plains Indians. Of course, they didn't have horses until Europeans brought them. But the horse really revolutionized the Native American. It made some tribes like the Comanche that were essentially, before they got the horse, they were some of the most technologically disadvantaged people, and they lived north, almost in Canada. I think like around North Dakota. A lot of the tribes around them would beat them up, but once they got the horse, they tended to they lived on the horse, kind of like Mongolians. They constantly from childhood trained on horses and learned how to fight on their backs and shoot their bows while riding on them. And then from there, they would just totally go through, just laying waste wherever they went, pillaging all the way down here to Texas. So, in fact, Comanche is not what they called themselves. I forgot what they called themselves. I think Comanche was an Apache word that meant the enemy. So everybody just called them the enemy. The enemy. Mid-latitude forest. So this is like a temperate forest, much like we have here in East Texas. Temperate forest made up of both deciduous and non-deciduous trees. So what's a deciduous tree? It's a tree that loses its leaves in the winter usually. Okay. And so we think of hardwood trees, usually fruit and nut-bearing trees. Non-deciduous trees are, of course, they're usually conifers, but they're not always conifers. Just think of pines and cedars. They stay green all year round.
Aren't those also called evergreen trees?
Yeah, evergreen's another term for them as well because they're green all year round. East Texas is kind of funny. We're called the Piney Woods region, but a lot of the Tyler area back in the days of early Texas colonization, this was actually mostly very large oaks and elms, and they were ancient trees. But about 100 or so years ago, there was a very large industry in lumber mills, right? So a lot of the forest were cut down, the timber was sold across the nation on the trains, and a lot of the region was made into either people were looking for oil during the oil boom, or they raised cattle. We know from some of the earliest accounts of people who went through here who could write, like Stephen F. Austin, that a lot of East Texas was super boring to them, like riding on horseback for days through pine tree after pine tree after pine tree, and just occasionally seeing a deer here and there. Just like days and days of pine forest. I think that sounds kind of cool, though. Grasslands prairie, large area of flat grasslands and temperate. So once again, think of part of the Great Plains, or perhaps a little cooler. It usually has thin soil.
Taiga, Minecraft reference?
They're susceptible to where if you plow them up too much, the topsoil can get blown away by the wind and cause things like, the Dust Bowl back in the 20s. So taiga, large coniferous forest, a biome found south of what we call tundra. You can find these in Russia, Canada, and of course, Alaska. The largest forest in the world. So yeah, much of Canada is actually taiga. And there are these beautiful coniferous forests, these pine forests. But the thing is, a lot of people don't choose to live in that region because even though it's these giant pine forests, it gets very cold in the winter, but the ground is kind of marshy, right? So it's like not quite like swamp, but in the summer it's like really muddy all the time. It's hard to track through or keep good roads, and in the winter that freezes up. Tundra, cold, treeless plain north of the taiga. The south is frozen most of the time. This soil is called permafrost because it is permanently frosted, kind of like parts of it will thaw out throughout parts of the year, of course. But so yeah, these aren't necessarily places that humans usually choose to live. There's not a lot of options as far as like farming. And agriculture is the basis of where people live. People, even if they're not farmers or have any farmers near them, they tend to live in places where you can farm. It's just a natural thing. It's because usually the temperature is more hospitable. It's easier to get water and stuff like that, you know.
My hand is on fire.
I'm sorry. You need to bring a cup of water so you can dip it in.
Hello. Got water. Come on, Ella.
No water for you, sir. Yeah, next.
Is that it?
All right, I think that's going to be a good stopping point. Like I told you, I was going to keep it short today. So it has to do with different climate types. We're going to come back with demographics, such as population and things like that. We'll come back tomorrow. So make sure you do your study island. If you haven't done it yet, do your quiz. So those of you who are in the class, I am going to have somebody taking their quiz. I'm going to need you to be super secret quiet while you work on your study island. If you haven't done your last one, do it first or you got 0. See you later.